You're now live.
We are now live and get that notice down. Okay, we're live. This is Friday, February 11th. This is the Senate Finance Committee. And first item on the agenda is Our Voices Exposed. It's a youth group from Chittenden County. No, okay.
We are OVX Twin Valley. We are from the Windham County.
Windham County. Okay, I believe they contacted me several months ago, and we've been. They have a youth day at the State House, and we've been trying. Normally, we'd have them in the committee room, but the Senate is still virtual, so we have them on Zoom. And we introduce ourselves. I'm Senator Ann Cummings from Washington County. Senator, I'm going to go as you're on my screen. So I've got Michael, you're next.
Michael Sorokin from Chittenden County.
Mark?
Senator Mark McDonald from Orange County.
Okay. Randy?
Senator Randy Brock from Franklin County.
Ruth?
Hi, thanks for being with us. I'm Senator Ruth Hardy from the Addison District.
And Chris Pearson and Chris, we got P and B if they do it in school. So Chris Pearson.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Chris Pearson from Chittenden County. Great to have you with us.
Okay, and the remaining Chris.
The remaining Chris. The remaining Chris is Chris Bray from the Addison Senate District, and I live in Bristol. Thanks.
So welcome. It is Friday. We have had a long week, a lot of it talking about student waiting, which you may find interesting at some point. And it is Friday, and we get a little relaxed, I guess, by Friday, letting off a little steam before we start. So I will turn this. I've got Shelley's name up. Shelley, the floor is yours, and I will let you tell us what you think we should know, okay?
All right, my name is Catherine Thomas, and this is Callie Molo. We both attend Twin Valley Middle High School in Whitingham, Vermont. We wanted to talk to you guys a little bit today about teen vaping and teen nicotine use. We are from Our Voices Exposed, which is a Vermont organization of teens against tobacco and nicotine products. Do you wanna do this one? Let's finish off with that one. Let's start with the ads.
So basically, we've been seeing a lot of ads online in social networking apps. And I've seen a lot of ads on Instagram talking about promotions for companies like Wish and AliExpress, which are companies who are not regulated and they don't ID for any kinds of substances. But I've seen a lot of prevention ads on Snapchat.
Okay. I believe we outlawed selling vapes online.
Yes, those third-party sellers, they are mostly based overseas. They do sell counterfeit and black market vapor products.
Okay. We ran into this with cigarettes. We fondly called them Ho Chi Minh cigarettes. They came in from overseas and were very difficult to regulate.
And we do have some examples of those advertisements if you would like.
Sure. If you can email, do you have them to put up now or you could?
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
It says that screen sharing is disabled.
Faith, can you allow them to screen share?
It's now enabled.
It is enabled.
Thank you so much. Let's just pull that up. Shelley, do you have that? Is it your slide? Yeah. Sorry about this, technical difficulties.
It happens to everybody.
Where'd it go? Yeah, I just opened it, so. There it is. All right.
They're much faster at fixing it than I am.
Okay, there we go.
Well,
Can you kind of just focus on we've got your side screens too. I think you can focus that so we just see the ad.
let me just put this into that.
Don't worry about it. Just go with where you are.
All right, so this is the AliExpress. And here is another AliExpress ad. This is all based overseas, and a lot of the comments and reviews that I saw on this were things like tastes good, worked, and most importantly, the most asked question was, do they ID at the door? And the answer to that is no, because there's no way of knowing that there's a vape in there because the package is all discreet and
So you get an envelope and nobody knows what it is. Okay.
And these are some of the most popular vapes that we've seen in school. This is the Hide Edge. It is a square disposable vape. Disposable vapes are the most popular kind right now. Juuls are not cool anymore. And neither are mods. They haven't been for a few years now. We have some physical models if you would like to see those. Would you like to see those on camera?
Committee, if you've got them and you would like us to see them, that's fine.
Okay, so these are some of our dead confiscated models through the Deerfield Valley Community Partnership. We've got things like this.
Okay, I think you have to take your screen down because we can't really, everybody can't see you when we're screen sharing. There we go. Now they can see you.
So we have got some packaging.
Okay.
It does have the contains nicotine, but it has like a cute little picture all over the mod. And this one is Kang Vape, and it is Yellow Breeze. So that is what that looks like. And kids can just kind of hide it like this and like use it.
And that's fairly large.
This is one of the bigger, chunkier ones as well. Strawberry flavored. But again, very easy to like if you have a baggy sweatshirt on. And then you just toss it out and your parents don't know because you don't have that jewel piece to charge with a mod. This is the smallest one so far that has been confiscated. And you can just really
Talk about the problem of disposing as well.
there's also no way to dispose these safely. They are hazardous waste. So when teachers confiscate these, they just have to put them in a drawer and they don't know what to do with them. And then once they're in that drawer, kids will more than likely find a way to go back in and just take it back or take back somebody else's. Maybe they'll find a flavor that they like better.
Okay.
There's a big culture of sharing. So like if I were to have this, half the school would have used it.
That sounds healthy in day of pandemic.
Yep.
Retail price is also like $10.
The retail price of one of these is about $10 for, they usually advertise how many puffs.
19.
So like this one has almost 2,000 hits, meaning that you can suck on this 2,000 times and you will get nicotine for $10.
Okay.
And whereas Juul is now almost $100 to start. I know this because my parents tried it once and hated it. But kids, because of the price rise, don't do it anymore. They went for the cheaper disposable alternative.
Sure. Okay. Is there is a lot of vaping still going on in schools?
Yes. Yeah, and it's hard to figure out. My family has used vaping as a way to quit smoking. And it's hard to find out how to keep it away from young people while allowing the people who want to quit and are adults to
Right.
still do so safely.
That's been an issue we've kind of grappled with, is how do you do that?
And we have one idea if you'd like to share, Callie.
So we currently have 4 prevention programs in our school, and those are VCAT, which is Vermont Kids Against Tobacco, ATI, which is above the influence, OVX, Our Voices Exposed, and Pride, which is a community partnership, which is basically just all drugs, preventing them. So we were just thinking about more funding for prevention programs.
Okay. I believe more funding will be coming, ironically, when we legalize cannabis. But
Okay.
it's one of those things. But there, a good portion of the money from cannabis is going, and I'm looking at Senator Pearson, who has been following this closely for the committee. It is going to prevention, right, Senator? So there should be more prevention. I believe some of it's going to after-school programs, thinking that if kids have constructive things to do, they might be less inclined to start vaping at an early age. Probably won't do after school for high school, but maybe up through middle school. And we'll see what do you see works as prevention?
Definitely activities, things to keep kids busy, because a lot of people that go out and get high just say, I was bored. It was something to do. So having something that gives them a sense of purpose and makes them feel good that isn't drugs would be really important.
We talk a lot about anxiety and coping.
Yeah, a lot
use
of people use nicotine specifically for a coping mechanism for things like anxiety and depression brought on by the pandemic. So funding for prevention programs would definitely be useful to kind of focus on mental health as well.
Actually, 2 of us spent this morning in health and welfare, Senator Hardy and I, talking about mental health programs and specifically youth services and youth mental health programs. So anything you'd like to, you can email any thoughts you might have to either myself or Senator Hardy, or all you've got is Faith's email, send them to her and she'll send them on. Because we know these things are all interlocked, and they have been, and we also know that COVID has made it worse for people. So, Senator Sirotkin, you have a question?
Yes, thank you for coming. Do you have a ballpark figure of how many students in your high school vape on a regular basis?
I would say probably half and half, like half do, half don't.
I know probably like 70% have tried it.
right?
But on a regular basis, probably like half and half.
And do you feel like it's a gateway to cigarettes?
No, God, no. A lot of the students that I see vaping, if you ask them about cigarettes, they're like, that is the most disgusting thing on the planet. I would never do that because it makes your clothes smell, and it burns more. And because the campaign against cigarettes was going on for so long, kids think it's gross because they've heard so much so young that
Okay.
there's all the chemicals and stuff in it. So
All right, so we failed in our attempts to let them know that there are equally bad, if not worse, chemicals in some of the vapes. And I assume the ones that are coming unregulated from overseas, we have no idea what's in there.
my friends and I joked that there was pee in them.
That's possible.
It
Okay.
is.
Talk about the
They are unregulated.
That's
And there
really,
are some kids that do want to quit, but it's really hard because of the higher nicotine content in vapes than there is in cigarettes.
Okay.
I don't know how much prevention will work for kids like me who are already 18 and have already made their decision.
Okay.
But I think coming through the next generation and really educating the younger people and just having it be a common part of culture that
Right.
vapes are not healthy will be really important in prevention.
Okay, so we need to start early. Once you're in high school or middle school, it's too late.
Yes.
Okay.
it's really interesting to me that your reaction to cigarettes was visceral in how disgusting it was, yet the same stuff is in vapes and people don't know it.
Or they've already started, so they don't care.
And they smell good.
Taste
good.
The biggest part for a lot of people, a lot of kids my age were always taught how horrible cigarettes were right from the time we were in kindergarten. And you know, they were smelly and kids who smelled like cigarettes were gross. And that was a big culture shift from previous generations. And it put most kids off from smoking. I only know one child in the entire school of 200 who has even tried a cigarette.
Wow.
Okay, so prevention does work.
Yes.
Now we've got to figure out how to do that with vapes.
Yeah.
Okay, Senator Bray.
Well, thank you again for coming. It's great to hear from people who are out in a part of the world that the rest of us aren't necessarily every day. So the question I have is the vapes that we were talking about that you were showing us, are they being shipped from overseas or they originate overseas and they're being purchased from a US store? Even if it's mail order, it's being shipped from somewhere in the United States.
A lot of vapes like these have not been shipped. A lot of parents think that this is healthier than cigarettes. So they will say, I'd rather you do this than go smoke a cigarette. And they'll kind of condone that behavior. And I know that there are a few places locally that I've heard do not ID.
That do not what, please?
Do not ID. They don't make you show your ID.
Okay. So do you have any sort of ballpark sense of how many people buy from an online store versus it's pretty much out in the open? You're picking it up in a local store?
I think most kids in the school pick it up locally, or have their parents pick it up,
Or friends.
or other friends, and then it's sold in between because friends will sell to friends for a lower price, and then they'll both share it. Well, I mean, everybody will share it, but.
Okay. Well, Senator Pearson and I were talking, I don't know, feels like it was pre-pandemic, I think 2 years ago, maybe more, about different ways to not have vapes become litter basically,
Mhm.
problematic trash. And so one possibility was having a deposit on them. If there were a deposit on them, do you think people would bring them back? I know that's speculation on your part, but we're looking for a way to manage that as a kind of waste problem.
It was a high enough deposit.
I think people would, yes.
Right.
I think people would definitely drop it off or have parents drop it off if they didn't want to get caught. Because it is a pain to most kids will just throw it in the garbage, I'm sure, which is not safe because there's a live battery in there that could explode at any moment.
I do see a lot of them on the sides of the roads, like right now. I'm sure if I were to go down in Mount Snow, which is the most local city near us, I could find a bunch of them on the side of the road.
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. We are running out of time. So this has been very helpful. And anything you can think of that would be effective in prevention programs, if the best place would be either to send it to me or to Senator Hardy. And we all have the same emails. I'm acummings@leg.state.vtt.us, and she's R. Hardy. We all have our first initial, last name, and the @ is all the same. And it's on, if you go to the State House website, you can find any of us. So that would be helpful. Senator McDonald has a question before we sign off.
As a former 8th grade teacher, I'm curious to know what grade level our witnesses are today.
I am a high school senior. I'm 18 years old.
I'm a high school sophomore. I'm 15 years old.
Yeah, well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, committee. We have, I got to go to my third or fourth screen here. 2 gubernatorial appointments. And I don't see my name on here because I have Mary Skinner. We have 2 gubernatorial appointments to the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. Tom Levitt is from the Northfield Savings Bank, so I will do him. I have Fred Baser from Bristol. Would somebody like to call Fred? Okay, Senator Bray. And if anybody, Senator Bray has Riley Allen, Senator Sirotkin is Peter Gregory, Senator Hardy is Karen Hale, and Carolyn Carpenter. Oh, Senator Hardy also is Carolyn Carpenter. If you get any of those done, just let Faith know and we'll schedule a couple minutes to go through them. So far, we haven't gotten a commissioner or a secretary, so these will all go on I vote everybody on page 232. I think we usually do those on a Friday, unless someone asks to have one brought up. So,
Madam
okay.
Chair, can you tell me again, I didn't catch what you said Fred Baser was appointed to.
Let me check. I believe it is the Vermont Housing Finance Agency.
Okay.
I just have his contact information on what. Here it is. Yeah, I believe they are both, but I will have Faith will send you the
Okay, thank you.
letter and the contact information. Okay.
Thank you.
And we can do that. Senator Brock.
This is a question, and it probably is more a question for the Gov Ops Committee than anything else. But I always wonder when we have these appointments, whether anybody has done any due diligence on the people who've been appointed.
No.
I've seen a number of instances, particularly of people running for public office in Vermont who are convicted felons and a number of other things like that. And I just wonder, is there any background investigation process that applies to folks like this? This is just a curiosity. Maybe whether any know or not, I don't know.
I think that would go to the governor's office. And
Yeah,
we
right.
could send a query back and ask if they do any kind of a background check.
Due diligence, if any, done over people who are being given to us to vet. And of course, we're not really vetting anybody. We're having at best a conversation with them at a distance. And even if it's a commissioner or a secretary, we have a 15-minute conversation online, but we nobody ever asks any hard questions like, what's the longest time you were ever in jail or prison? Which we might want
to.
You don't
give you all the
Senator Brock, are you suggesting the governor doesn't take his appointment power seriously? I'd like to get clarity on what you're suggesting here.
Well, I'm suggesting that we do the background investigations to people that we've already approved during the Sheldon administration.
Nice try. Okay.
Okay. I think it is obviously Friday afternoon, but a couple of us have a hard stop around 4. So I want to get back to the agenda, even though the students were actually very helpful. All right. Today we are going to take up, we've got 2 to take up, and neither one of them is weighting or timeshares. We're going to take a break, and we're going back to the Energy Savings Account Partnership Pilot Program. That was the one that had come up, and they asked if they could go and kind of talk amongst themselves because nobody had actually claimed any money. They were paying their efficiency payments. These are businesses into an account. I believe there were 4 out of 12 that had actually submitted a plan, but no one had been able to get far enough along to claim that amount of money, and it was going to expire. So we've got a couple. We were trying to figure out what went on and if we extended it forever, if we just extended it for the folks that are in, and get a read on it. So first in my agenda, I have Dan Riley from Efficiency Vermont. Dan, are you here? There you are. Okay. And you were with us before.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I know we're still waiting for ACCD, but I think Efficiency Vermont can get started, and then hopefully they'll have joined by then. Does that work, Madam Chair?
That works fine. We have a lot of witnesses this afternoon.
And it's Friday afternoon, so I will talk as quickly as I can.
It is Friday, and I have a tradition of letting the committee out at 3:30 on Friday because they used to have to drive home in the snow. So we're not being quite, they're not getting out that early anymore, but we do try not go late, like past 5. So.
Well, for the record, Daniel Riley, Public Affairs Director, Efficiency Vermont. We have a very, very brief presentation. I will cue that up in just 1 second. I'm going to turn it right over to my colleague, Dave Westman. Before I do, just to let the committee know, since we last came before you, all the participants involved, we've met with all the companies, the 3 organizations, ACCD, the department, and Efficiency Vermont have met. We're coming forth today having achieved some semblance of a consensus. And with that, let me just turn it right over to Dave, and I will share my screen for the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dan. And thank you, committee, for giving us a little extra time so that we could come together and reach this agreement. This Monday, we met with all of the participants, or as many of the participants who could join us.
David, I just need you to identify yourself for the record.
My apologies. David Westman, Director of Regulatory and State Agency Affairs.
Okay.
Thank you. We had our roundtable discussion with the participants on Monday afternoon. It was a very productive and helpful session where Efficiency Vermont, ACCD, and the Department of Public Service was able to hear where a lot of the participants are at in their energy savings account pilot programs and status, and specifically what they'd be looking for as next steps. That discussion then was followed up the next day by a three-way conversation between Efficiency Vermont, ACCD, and the department. And we were able to thread that needle of all of the concerns that we have heard and come up with a mutually agreeable proposal for the committee to consider as a form of extension for the ESA pilot. So Dan, if you want to advance the slide. I will go through, there are 4 recommendations here. Again, these are consensus recommendations by the 3 organizations. And then I will hand it over to, well, first we'll answer any questions following the presentation of the agreement. Then I'll hand it over to Tate to talk about his follow-up then on Wednesday afternoon with participants themselves. And then we do have 2 participants with us today. So I'll just go through these and then take questions at the end. The first point of agreement is an 18-month extension for all pilot participants. This will bring us through the end of 2023. There are some participants who may want to opt out of any extension at all, and they may do so by written notice to the Public Utility Commission, at which point they will immediately be able to receive all of the EEU services that other Vermont customers can participate in. The second point of agreement is to establish a working group under the leadership of the department. The ESA organization, the current ESA account company, Champlain Water District, and the ESA pilot participants with Efficiency Vermont and ACCD to develop and recommend changes to the permanent ESA program. Again, as a reminder, the ESA pilot was established under different rules from the current ESA program. The long-term interest for everyone is to transition this into a permanent program based on the learnings from the pilot. So that work group will, by no later than January 23, propose recommendations for how the rules and structure should be. I'm sorry, we will make recommendations to make the program permanent by January 23, with the goal to have those new rules in place by January of 24. Dan, next slide, thank you. There was an issue of verification and evaluation under the existing ESA pilot rules. We have agreed that the department should complete its verification of the ESA pilot projects that have been committed through June of this year, and not have an extension on that time frame. Enough participants identified that they have projects that can be accrued and started, and the department has agreed to do a verification based on what it will know starting in June of 2022. And we recommend that the PUC complete their evaluation and provide it to the legislature on January 23 as currently scheduled. Lastly, we agree that any pilot participant should be allowed to request from the PUC, and the PUC shall consider and approve all reasonable requests for continuation of ESA pilot participation under the current terms and conditions through no later than December 2026. This is specifically for some of the organizations that have identified some of the strong value propositions of the existing rule and recognize that there may be an interim period as we transition. However, the waiver is not going to continue into perpetuity, and that the PUC may not issue a waiver for the entire list of participants. This would have to be an individual participant asking for this extension. Those are the 4 agreements that we have come to that we would be happy to work with the committee on. I would now offer Tate from ACCD or TJ Poor from the Department of Public Service to offer anything that they feel is important that maybe I missed.
Okay, and you have sent that slide to us. Okay,
Correct.
because once we hear this, we're going to have something drafted in legalese
That's right.
that we can then mark up or
That's right.
mess up. Okay.
And we appreciate that as a next step. My colleagues from the ACCD and the department and I were able to reach this agreement largely in principle, and then roll it out to the participants, and then sort of dot the I's and cross the T's over this last week. And I think that is a reasonable next step following any conversation that we have here.
To have an amendment drafted. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Brooks.
Right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, other committee members. For the record, my name is Tate Brooks. I'm the Deputy Secretary for the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. I guess just to provide a little more context, it was back in the fall time, late fall, when we at the agency were reaching out and having conversations with the 9 companies that were participating in the pilot, when we started getting feedback that again, because of kind of the original rollout, took a little bit longer than expected as far as setting up the rules for the program. You know, the 3-year program, the 3-year pilot really almost kind of ended up being more of a 2-year pilot. And then with COVID hitting and the supply chains hitting, that's when we were certainly getting feedback that, hey, was there a possibility of an extension? I do want to thank Efficiency Vermont and the Public Service Department. We started having conversations with them to let them know what we were hearing from the pilot participants. As you just heard, there was a large group of us that got together on Monday to kind of, once again, you know, the agency once again heard from the pilot participants, but it was, I think, a good opportunity for Efficiency Vermont and the Public Service Department to hear from the participants directly. As David mentioned, we did follow up the next day and hammered out this 18-month extension agreement. And on Wednesday, myself and Commissioner Goldstein caught up with not all of the participants. We did shoot out an email to those that participated in the pilot and heard from about half of them. And so on Wednesday afternoon, we caught up with about half the participants, kind of rolled this out, and I think it was positively received. So I know we have some of the participants here, but we also have TJ Poor. I don't know if.
Yes, TJ is here from the Department of Public Service. So
hi everybody.
Well,
Good
let
afternoon.
me see if we've got any questions for Mr. Brooks first. I'm not seeing any. Okay, so Mr. Poor, the floor is up. There's Senator McDonald. Yes.
What was the date where the evaluation was supposed to be finished?
The evaluation by the Public Utility Commission will be completed by January of 2023 under this agreement. So no change in that time frame.
Maybe I could try again. What was the date when the evaluation of this program was supposed to be completed?
January of 2023.
Yep.
And we're extending it beyond 2023 now?
No, Senator McDonald, the proposal actually is to keep the verification and evaluation by the department and Public Utility Commission on the same time frame as is currently scheduled.
So perhaps I misunderstood. I thought there was an agreement to then recommend that the policy continue.
The recommendation is for 18-month extension from June of this year through December of 2023. And while that extension continues, we will know enough based on what is currently committed and accrued by the current participants to complete that verification and evaluation. I would invite my colleague TJ Poor at the department to identify how the department plans to do that verification process this year if we want to get into that level of technical details. But the idea is that there needs to be a transition period where we take the lessons that were learned from the pilot and apply some form of lessons learned to the final structure of the ESA program. And in that interim period, these participants will be allowed to continue participating in the pilot under the current rules.
Okay. So I might understand, Madam Chair, that when the evaluation is done, there is a transition period to something beyond what statute calls for?
I think when this gives an 18-month extension to the present participants to finish their projects. And there is an evaluation, and afterwards, I believe they will be back with a recommendation about whether or not this should continue. But I haven't had time to digest everything that was just put on the screen. So we will go through this step, section by section, and get the time frame complete. Senator Bray, you have a question.
Quick question. Who will be leading the evaluation? Is that the department?
Maybe we should go to Mr. Poor.
Hi, for the record, TJ Poor, Director of Planning at the Public Service Department. And Senator Bray, to answer your question, there's two components that we're talking about here. One is the verification, which kind of falls under the umbrella of evaluation. The verification of projects that are completed under the ESA pilot, or to be completed under the pilot. Some of that may be done prospectively to the extent we can, given the timing of where projects will be at later this year. And that verification will be done by the Department of Public Service. Then there is the pilot evaluation writ large, which is done by the commission, which is in the current design of the pilot, that the recommendation is to keep that. And so the department's verification will help inform the Public Utility Commission broad evaluation of the pilot. And that will come in, we're proposing to keep that date and have that come in January of 2023, so that we can evaluate how this has gone and avoid kind of a stop-start. The recommendation to extend the time frame really avoids a stop-start where these current participants of the pilot, as it stands now, would be out in June of, the pilot ends in June of this year, and then we figure out a program, and then everybody comes back in, and it's kind of in and out within almost a year's time or 18 months time. And so one of the goals of this recommendation is to kind of stop that stop-start problem, I guess.
Okay. And can I just double check sort of the basic structure? The participants in the project, they need to invest a dollar amount equivalent to what they would have paid to the energy efficiency charge if they had never entered the pilot program. Is that correct?
The participants can keep up to 100% of what they would have paid or what they paid into the energy efficiency charge if they invest that in qualifying measures. Right. Yes.
Right. And then what metrics are applied to determine whether a measure is qualifying or not? I mean, for the EEC, right, we're looking for kilowatt hours saved, but per dollar, I suppose it would be the way you would say this is a good choice or not a good choice for investing. What metric is used to decide whether or not a qualifying measure is an appropriate investment?
I could answer that at a high level, but I wonder if Mr. Westman could get into the details of that.
Okay, thank you.
I can. I'd be happy to, TJ.
Okay.
Broadly speaking, so first at the high level, the idea is that these are energy efficiency measures, and that they would reduce a participant's energy use if compared against a business as usual alternative. So this is something that we do in the efficiency utility all the time. Is we take a different package of measures, and one measure is more efficient than the other, and the efficiency utility is there to support the customer in either financial or technical assistance to have that more efficient measure in place. The difference with this pilot is that it can actually be broadly applied to something other than just, say, a measure replacement, but it can actually be applied to a new measure, a measure that didn't previously exist, or a measure that is new to the company installing it. And the energy efficiency funds that they hold in their account can be used for the full cost of the measure, and not the incremental cost that the energy efficiency utility is currently applying. So that is the first criteria, Senator, is that it does have to have a comparable energy savings against its alternative. It can be a new measure. It doesn't have to be an incremental payment as the current structure is. There are also other screening criteria unique to this pilot, which is that it can be used for a process fuel efficiency measure. Currently, our electric funds go towards electric efficiency measures. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. But also, there is an additional screening criteria for these measures that includes the potential for economic development. And we take all of these different considerations and we put it into what we call our screening tool. And each participant who files an energy management plan lists out the measures that they are considering in their program. And then we approve those measures based on whether or not they pass that screening criteria. Once they pass, then it shows up in the energy management plan, and we have a whole suite of different measures that are reflected in those EMPs.
Okay, I think the last question to complete the equation for me is, when a homeowner participates and reduces their kilowatt hours used, it delivers a system benefit to all ratepayers. Do you have that same lens to examine these measures, so that, yes, you might have process savings or something like that, but do you look for a system-wide benefit, or is the frame of analysis narrowed to the business itself?
I wouldn't characterize it. It's a really good question, Senator. I wouldn't characterize it as a narrowing. In fact, those same system benefits, if it's an electric efficiency measure that the participant is contemplating, are still valued in the screening tool. So those characteristics of creating system benefits are still there. So for example, a process fuel efficiency measure would not have that same compounding effect on system benefits. And so for that reason, there is a difference. Process fuel efficiency doesn't create system benefits for all customers like electric efficiency measures do. And so, that would not be taken into account for screening a fossil fuel efficiency measure in the same way.
Right. Can I ask one more question, Madam Chair? And that is,
yes.
Could you do something completely different? Like you'd say, we have a very old delivery fleet associated with our manufacturing facility. We're going to upgrade to much more efficient trucks. So, now you're not even in the plant anymore, but you would be reducing fossil fuel use and more efficiency, all the rest. Can you do something entirely different?
Electric vehicles were not contemplated in the allowable use categories of pilots for the pilot, I should say. However, demand control, demand management were. So for example, if a facility was going to transition to an electric fleet, they could use their pilot funds to pay for the charging infrastructure, the control devices, and everything that would enable those vehicles to be efficiently connected to the grid and allowing utility demand management controls.
And what if it's just a diesel engine that gets twice the mileage?
Also would not be covered under this pilot. Transportation as a general classification was not directly considered.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, Senator Pearson.
I wonder if TJ or David could just help me remember the impetus for this. I know we're in a pilot. It was supposed to be finished or be wrapping up and getting us a report, and then we would make a decision. But can you just remind us where the hiccup was, so that, and I know you've testified before, but just jog my memory if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take a swing at that first, and then ask TJ to go any further. The idea is that it did take a number of months for all of the final rules of the pilot to be instituted. We received this legislation, under normal passage, and then a few months later, the commission opened an investigation, I believe, in the summer of 2018. I'm trying to get my dates correct there, but it did take a number of months to sort out the rules for how this program would be implemented. And beginning in July of that year, I believe it was July of 2019, we actually we received the request for proposals. So customers had to raise their hand, in effect, to the Public Utility Commission and say they want to be a part of it. July of 2019, those programs were, those participants were accepted into the program, and they began accruing their accounts. While even after they were approved, there were still further process and further rules being worked out. And so there was a delay in getting all of those program rules established, and the screening criteria that I just described all needed to sort of be hammered out among the participating customers. And that process more or less went on for about a year. And in the meantime, we had a global pandemic, which had a dramatically different effect for different participants, some more so than others. And so the idea of an extension to both allow for that time where it took for us to formalize the program, as well as the delays that resulted from the pandemic, gave good cause for consideration of an extension. The legislation that we were just talking about 2 weeks ago proposed a 3-year extension. This is a modification of that legislation, S269, I believe. And what we have proposed here is essentially a more nuanced and different version of that extension, something that all of both from Efficiency Vermont perspective as the implementer, from the department's perspective as the regulator, and ACCD's perspective is working with these customers on a daily basis, trying to sort of meld all of these different needs for a reasonable conclusion to the pilot, as well as then next steps, so that we can take the lessons learned. And you're right, Senator Pearson. I'm sorry, we did just kind of jump right into it, but a very good question for the background. And I don't, Mr. Poor, Mr. Brooks, my colleagues from the agencies, if you have anything you want to add to that, I'd welcome it.
I might just add one thing, in that the pilot, when it was originally established, I think was intended to see if there are transformational opportunities that this block of customers had, that they were unable to take advantage of under the current energy efficiency charge paradigm. And really why I think why this got introduced this year is for the reasons that Mr. Westman and Mr. Brooks have said, is, the delay, not really a delay, but just the process to get started, and then the pandemic coming on us. I think the agreement reflects an understanding of let's extend this to see if those transformational projects are really going can happen, to see if the pilot will do what it was intended, and to give an opportunity to evaluate and set up the best possible type of permanent program going forward after the pilot.
If we do it. Okay, so
Thank you.
actually, I mean, we set up a pilot. Sounds like we underestimated the amount of time it would take to set up all the rules and regulations to get the pilot moving. Just started to get moving and the pandemic hit, and we've got some folks from some of the businesses here who I think can tell us what that did to them. So we're now coming to the end, but we don't have anything to evaluate because nobody's drawn down the money. None of the projects are finished. We have 4 that have submitted plans. Am I remembering that number correctly? As of
I will pull up the old presentation and share if we want to get into the specifics.
Okay,
that sounds
but
about right.
basically it's all been slowed down for a number of reasons. And the proposal now simply is that we extended 18 months to give the project a chance to work out, and then we can decide if it's worth continuing. Is that basically, and you will be coming out with recommendations at the end after you do all the evaluations and see what actually plays out as to whether or not that gets extended.
That's correct, Madam
Okay.
Chair. And there are, just to re-summarize what we talked about 2 weeks ago, 9 of the 9 participants have identified projects and done some level of analysis, identifying them as eligible. 7 of those 9 participants have completed the societal cost effectiveness screening criteria, which I referred to earlier. And you are correct, 4 of the participants have filed energy management plans. Those are the formal plans in front of the Public Utility Commission identifying what the company would be spending its energy savings account money on. And so very good memory there, Madam Chair. It's 4 of 9. I don't pretend to know how many other issues you've probably dealt with between then and now, but very good memory. And what I think is important to say is that there is an existing energy savings account program. It is a legacy program. It is many years old at this point. There is one customer in it, not violating any participant rules.
No.
I can say it's Champlain Water District. They are the one customer in the energy savings account. They themselves have found that some of these rules are outdated, and there is an appetite there for them to update some of the rules as well. And so what we would like to do is take what we've learned from this pilot, and after a few more months of implementation, we'll have even more experience. And this working group will enable us to take those lessons. And if there is a statutory change that would be necessary in order to implement those recommendations, then we would go back to the committee for further consideration. Otherwise, if there are no statutory considerations that are needed, we can just update the energy savings account program as it exists today through PUC rule. So
Okay.
that is essentially why we're leaving this open for discussion, is that if no statutory considerations are warranted, you will just get the evaluation, you will just get the report, and no recommendations would actually need to be implemented.
Okay, Senator Hardy, you have a question?
Yeah, okay, so but your number 4 recommendation is something that goes to 2026. So are you saying that you would either come back to us and say, or whoever us is then, and say, we need statutory changes because of the things we've learned from evaluation, or these current participants would be put into the existing program that's already in statute, that's not a pilot program. Is that?
The goal would absolutely be to, as they transition out of the pilot, move them into the existing account. There are a limited number of instances, and I don't want to pretend to represent what those may be. And so our agreement here, the fourth agreement, is to allow the flexibility upon a reasonable request that the commission may evaluate whether it could be extended for an additional 3 years. And we heard this on the call, that there are some participants who are trying to do the types of transformational projects that Mr. Poor was identifying, and that it is just taking longer to actually accrue those projects. And the rule that we're working under is that they need to be able to develop the project and essentially book the expense. That means finding a vendor who can implement and essentially invoice the project. Project doesn't actually have to be completed, but it sort of needs to be in the queue for getting built out. There are some concerns that some of these really big and transformational projects will take longer than just the 18 months.
Okay. And I think we've all heard about supply chain and personnel issues. And it sounds like there aren't going to be any trucks either in North America moving for a while. So, Senator McDonald.
Madam Chair, there seem to be two issues here. One is a variety of reasons why the folks that are participating haven't commenced what they're doing yet, and that's one issue. The question I'm asking is, when we do an evaluation, when they've had the time to engage in their experiment, and we evaluate, what will be the criteria that will be used to decide whether we should continue or not? And this is the issue that we're supposed to be looking at to see whether it continues. And
okay,
I hear words like, well, it was flexible enough and the request was reasonable, so then perhaps we would move forward. I'm looking for a measure that we can expect.
Okay, well, I think
the program we have now, everybody who buys electricity pays a fee, and every one of those people benefits from the work that's done. Every customer benefits from the work that's done in their own shop. They benefit, and they may be fortunate enough to also have someone come in and put in a new motor, and they get a second benefit. I believe that is correct.
Okay, I think
so.
Mr.
I want
West,
to know how this affects
all right,
all the people who are no longer able to apply for the benefit that these few companies in this experiment are being able to apply for at the expense of
so you're not
other
looking,
people who
you're not looking,
not receiving
right,
an opportunities. Yeah.
so you are not
So
looking,
I want to know how we're going to evaluate that.
Yes, I've got it. When we do electric efficiency, in theory, if they stop using electricity or they use less, then the cost for everybody goes down. I don't know how we've evaluated that either lately, but that is what's going on. This is a pilot because these businesses, mostly manufacturing, if not all, don't lend themselves to saving a lot of electricity. And so the reason for the pilot is that we want to see if we can find another way that manufacturing can exist in this state. I think the economic benefit, the thing they're providing, is jobs. Because if we can't work this out, we may lose the jobs. And that's why that's what this is a pilot for. And we will get to, and when we look at the writing, we can go through and set out the criteria, but we probably should go back to the original bill and see what we did there.
Well, you're correct, Madam Chair, but this presumes that the money that we would use to achieve the goals that you've just articulated would come from the Energy Efficiency Fund, which is currently used for everybody, and the money could come from somewhere else. Not that fund that was used
This
for
money
everybody.
is the money that
To
these
achieve the
companies-
same
Right.
goals.
This
No, I
money
beg
is
your
the
pardon?
money those companies would pay in to the energy efficiency account. It is sitting there, I assume, in a special account. And when they get an approved program, they can draw down up to what they would pay in. If they use less, they're not going to get it all back. If the cost is less than what they pay in. I want to get to the companies, and
Absolutely.
then this is
But that's
committee
not the
discussion.
question. Yeah.
Okay. This is
Okay.
committee discussion, and I want to get to the companies who are here. And I've now lost my agenda because I wasn't on there long enough. And let them talk, and then we can have committee discussion on this as we go forward. Okay, next I have Janet Bombardier, who is Chief Operating Officer and Chief Technology Officer from Chroma Technology and 89 North. And Jeanette, welcome. Just introduce yourself for the record. Maybe tell us what Chroma and 89 North, what they do, and what your experience has been with this program.
I would love to, and hopefully I can also take over the screen. If I go to share screen, I have a few charts.
If you don't have shared screen, Faith can give it to you.
Okay.
Do you have it? Okay.
Can you see
there
my chart?
go. Yep, there you go.
Oh, perfect. All right. So yes, so I'm Janet Bombardier. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Technology Officer for Chroma Technology, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today as one of the participants in this program, and hopefully can give you some feedback as well as answer questions you may have on us. So who's Chroma? The primary energy uses at Chroma versus 89 North, that's a smaller firm. What do? We design and manufacture high quality optical filters, which are pieces of glass with very thin films put on them that modify what light does. We're an employee-owned company. We're in Bellows Falls in Windham County, as you know, a pretty poor area of the state. We provide 150 quality jobs with really great compensation and benefits for all employees, including our entry-level employees. We've been able to continue to grow. And as a company, we're extremely committed to our community and a sustainable future. And just a proud fact is we weren't able to skip a beat during the pandemic in terms of our operations, and we didn't. The products we make go into PCR testing machines. And so we are proud to say that we've enabled over 1 million PCR tests and 200,000 machines with the products that we make. So what we do is not just important to the Vermont economy, but we like to say we help save the world. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and we would love to have any of you that would like to come visit us. We do take visitors if you're masked up. But this is a picture of a portion of our facility. It's a clean room manufacturing environment. That's the photo to the left. And what you can see, those large stainless steel pieces of equipment are what we call deposition chambers. And over here to the right, you can see one of our production technicians operating one of those chambers, which is where we take these pieces of glass and deposit very thin layers of materials on them. Just for reference, I believe we're the smallest participant in the pilot, and so we have an electric bill of just over $500,000 a year and growing. And our energy efficiency charges are $35,000 a year. What we did as a project, just at a very high level, is on those big pieces of equipment, we are replacing some of the pumps. They currently use what's called a cryogenic pump, which basically uses cold temperatures to remove any and all gases from those chambers. We have to have a very large volume, vacuum in those chambers in order to do our work. And we're replacing them with what's called a turbomolecular pump. When we do this work, it's not a plug and play. We have to actually take the chamber out of production. We have to cut new holes in it. We have to weld new flanges in. We have to buy very expensive pumps. And it takes us quite a bit of time. And in the first two chambers, it took us about 4 months a piece, because once we actually do the retrofitting, we have to reestablish our manufacturing process. This is a very high technology process, in minor changes in impurities in gas, in pumping rates, and in flow rates actually affect whether or not we can deposit our materials in nanometers on those pieces of glass in a quality manner. And the out-of-pocket cost per chamber retrofit is about $50,000. As I said, it took us each chamber, and we have completed 2 at this point. We had to take them down for about 4 months in order to do all the work. We are planning to do 2 more chambers, but right now some of the key parts we need are back ordered. And we had to invest significant technical resources. We used maintenance people, we used equipment engineers and process engineers to not only do the conversion of the equipment, but also to do this requalification and establishment of how we do our job. And I estimated conservatively that we've got at least 500 labor hours into doing these projects. And we did not need or use any EVT resources because technically they don't have a skill set to do these kinds of projects. What are the results? We've saved over 47,000 kilowatt hours per year per chamber. So that's a very traditional energy measurement. But as other speakers have indicated, what's also important to me is the concept of energy productivity. And by that, it's for every hour we deposit materials on the glass in this chamber, can I do it in a more effective way? And what we have now been able to measure is that we use 50% less energy per deposition hour while we do our job. So I consider that to be significant. It's higher than what we had calculated, but these are actual measurements. And in addition, we get some reduced load on our chilled water system. Chilled water systems are also energy hogs. But because the turbomolecular pumps don't need chilled water, we are seeing savings there as well. So that's the nature of our project. What I think is important to say about it is a project like this is significant to a manufacturing company. It's not changing light bulbs in the hallway. This was open heart surgery on what we do, and it came with tremendous risk. And while we had access to and accrued all of our efficiency dollars and have made 2 withdrawals on those dollars, we made significant investment as well as a company to do this, not just in terms of cash, but also with an extensive commitment of our labor. As some have mentioned, the program took a bit of time to roll out. I have provided for the record from our perspective how long it took. So it was established in May of 2019. The first time as participants in the program, we heard of what we had to do and how it was going to work was in September of 2020. I believe we were the first to file an energy management plan. That went back and forth for a couple months before that was figured out how those had to be filed. And we actually filed on the 3rd of February of 2021. Our first reimbursement happened in February of 2021. Also, a second one was done in October. As mentioned, we participated in a meeting on the 7th where we were able to provide some feedback and also get some additional clarity on how funding was going to work for at least for this pilot. To summarize, our perspective on this is the access to our efficiency charges, as they are very material when you have a $500,000 electric bill, was very important to initiating this complex and high cost project. These are not small investments, and knowing we had access to those funds because we screened made a difference in this decision. The project required a lot of innovation and engineering. Like in a lot of complex manufacturing systems, that's what it takes. And due to this high cost and complexity, these projects do take a long time. You have to plan them. You have to make sure your company is able to fund the remaining portion, that you have the staffing to support them, and then to quite honestly do them. I think it's important to note that when we in the manufacturing sector do projects like this, we're lining up to help the state of Vermont meet their energy goals. I believe the state needs us to do these projects, and we as companies have a responsibility to complete them. And certainly the participants in the project that I've worked with, because we do try to share information, the majority of us are located in very rural areas of Vermont, and our energy costs are very high. So we contribute significantly to the economy. From a feedback perspective, please extend the pilot. We used 1.5 years of the pilot period to get the program defined. We are being impacted a minimum of 6 months by supply chain issues in terms of being able to complete our work. And we've been at this steady since day one. Please make sure there's no gap for us to accumulate our efficiency charges. So as the pilot's extended, we want to keep putting in the bank those very large efficiency charges so that we can come back and do more projects and more innovative work. I think it's really important, and I like the fact that the department will continue with their report while the program recommendation is extended. There's no reason to have the program end and then write a report and then figure out what to do. It can be done in parallel. And also request that the participants have a very equal voice in any program redesign. Again, we really, having access to those charges makes a big difference in what projects you're willing to undertake. We totally appreciate the fact that there needs to be some causality in the cost to the department to do the verification. But these are large numbers, and I can also state that for Chroma, the traditional program simply didn't work. The reimbursements for these risky projects was too low to take them on. So with that, I don't know if there's anyone has any questions either about us as a company and what we make or what we did. Senator McDonald?
Okay, why don't you take the screen down and then we can see everybody.
Okay.
Do that, stop screen share.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
the speaker gave one of the clearest presentations in detail and that were understandable and that we've had on this sort of an issue. And I understand they replaced turbo molecular pumps and saved 47,000 kilowatt units per pump per year or something like that. And which is what the energy efficiency utility is supposed to do. And we usually have a number at how much we're paying per kilowatt hour to get savings. And I don't know the number, but it was, once it was at 3 cents a kilowatt hour, and then it was going up towards 4. What is the kilowatt hour cost of the project that was just explained to us so clearly.
I would have to follow up with you on that because, like I said, we're the efficiency charge reimbursement was maybe 40% of our total costs. I'd have to value the labor we put in.
Which is,
so I roughly, without, if you don't, I'll follow up.
So,
but you know, we're talking about $100,000 a piece of equipment to get that energy savings I quoted. So that's the total investment to achieve those, you know, savings per chamber.
So,
when we're done, we will have spent $400,000.
Okay. So what we've learned so far is that however we rated it didn't work for you.
The previous program.
Well, we don't know yet.
What I can say is the previous energy efficiency program, the traditional program, the way it calculated how many dollars you would get from Efficiency Vermont is very small, a lot less than the 35,000 we put in every year. You know, it's more like, I believe it would have been in the order of 5,000 to 7,000. And it wouldn't have been enough, to be honest, to make us take on such a risky and high dollar value project. Being able to know that we were going to have about $100,000 of the money we put in, again, nobody else's money, this is what came off our bill, made a difference in selecting this project and being willing and able to take it on. We still put in just as much money and time. And again, I think what's hard to explain, depending on your experience in manufacturing, is the risk we took on by taking down a piece of equipment for 4 months. You know, that was product we didn't make during that time. So we are very committed to what the project. We're very committed to sustainability and the energy reduction. But when we have access to our full funds, it makes a difference in what we're willing to take on.
Okay. I'm going
to
move.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We hit.
Okay.
I would like for us to understand the cost per kilowatt hour. And again, I want to thank the witness and look forward to a follow-up on this. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to get on to Matt Wells from West Rock, and I have Mark Klein from West Rock. Is he with you?
Yeah.
Yep, there he is. Okay. So the floor is yours. I know you were with us in the beginning.
I was. Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Matt Wells. I'm the Government Relations Manager for West Rock. It's good to be back with you all again, even if it is virtual. I'm just going to make a quick reintroduction of who we are before I turn it over to Mark Klein, who manages our Sheldon Springs mill. And he'll make some comments about the mill's participation in the pilot. Just to reintroduce ourselves, West Rock is a leading paper package manufacturer and recycler. We have 50,000 employees in 300 locations around the world. We also operate one of North America's largest recycling networks. We manage about 7.5 million tons of recovered material every year. Paper making is an energy-intensive, trade-exposed industry, and we were very involved with the discussions that led to the passage of the current pilot program. And we appreciate the opportunity to talk about our experience with the pilot to date and why we are supportive of the extension that has been described to you all today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark for some of the specifics.
Okay, welcome, Mark.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mark Klein. I'm the Regional General Manager for West Rock Sheldon Springs Recycled Paper Mill. Our Sheldon Springs mill, located in Franklin County, is a 100% recycled paper mill that makes coated recycled boxboard, or CRB, for cartons. The mill employs about 150 individuals in skilled trained trade jobs. On average, our employees earn about or over $80,000 a year between salary and benefits. And each year, the mill diverts over 100,000 tons of paper from landfills, provides more than $50 million in direct economic benefit to Vermont through payroll, taxes, and local purchases. Now, as we've shared with this committee previously, the mill is challenged by high energy costs. While the mill's energy intensity or usage per unit of production is in line with our other CRB mills, its per ton costs for energy are almost 54% higher than the average of the rest of the CRB group. So this equates to a headwind of nearly $3 million and places the mill at a significant competitive disadvantage. So part of our energy costs come in the form of the mandatory payments into the energy efficiency programs. The mill contributes over $350,000 a year in electrical efficiency charges, along with about $150,000 for natural gas efficiency. Now, historically, the mill has had difficulty recouping these costs, particularly on the electrical side due to restrictions in the energy efficiency program. And that's why we're pleased to work with this committee and the legislature and our partners at ACCD, Efficiency Vermont, and elsewhere in the passage of legislation establishing the current pilot. The mill became involved with the pilot because one of the benefits was that the program was structured to be better support of large industrial energy efficiency projects. And so additionally, WestRock qualifies to use pilot funds for thermal efficiency projects. This is important to us because while the bulk of our energy spend is for electric energy, there's a higher portion of our use and thus opportunity for efficiencies is on the thermal side. However, as you've heard, the implementation of the pilot was a little bit slower process than anticipated due to delays in the regulatory process, COVID restrictions, and inherent complexities involved with both establishing a program designed to handle transformative energy projects and implementing those projects. Now, the net result of all this is that what is on paper as a 3-year pilot will in reality be more like a 6-month pilot. And this limits not only the value that the participants and the state can derive from the program, but it'll also impact any evaluation that can be conducted, of the pilot at this time. So I'd like to quickly give you a real world example how this impacted WestRock as a participant. In early 2019, we embarked on a project, an over $20 million combined heat and power or CHP project that would transform how the mill consumes energy in our production process. Now, while steam is a critical part of the paper making process, and the CHP project would replace the mill's aging and inefficient steam boilers with a system that uses modern equipment to generate both steam and electricity, this one project would reduce our energy costs to below the WestRock recycle mill average, while increasing its overall thermal efficiency percentage by using waste heat from an electric generating turbine to generate steam for the paper drying process. So the size of this project is by its very nature a multi-year effort from start to finish to engineer, procure, construct, and commission the system. So the mill envisioned using pilot funds to perform the necessary front-end planning and prepare the project for a WestRock capital approval process. And the cost of this effort would approach $750,000. We believed it could be completed before the end of the pilot. But based on the early direction from PUC and conversations with Efficiency Vermont and the department, we believed this project would fit within the pilot parameters and began the process of submitting it for screening. However, late in July 21, in a response to questions on project qualification, the PUC issued an order that stated that, quote, ESA funds are intended to be used for planning and implementation of projects during the pilot program timeframe only, and they're not intended to be used to plan projects that are expected to be implemented in a future period after the ESA pilot program ends, unquote. So WestRock's interpretation of this guidance, which came nearly 3/4 of the way through the pilot, is that it functionally excludes the complex projects like our CHP, which would not be implemented prior to the end of the program in June of 22. So based on this, WestRock initially intended to pivot to some backup projects that would deliver significant energy savings, though certainly not to the degree that project CHP would. However, due to COVID restrictions and related workload, engineers and contractors were not available to complete the required work at the mill in the time frame that would fit the pilot requirements. And then that led us to turn to a third series of smaller, less complex projects that can be completed during the allotted time in the pilot. So these projects will deliver meaningful energy savings for the mill, and we'll be able to utilize 100% of our available funds. So in that sense, the pilot will be successful. However, based on the current end date, we won't be able to leverage it for the transformational type of projects that we had initially hoped for. So to conclude, the pilot was envisioned as a means to allow large, sophisticated energy users like us to more fully leverage the energy efficiency dollars, but delays due to lengthy rulemaking, COVID-19, and inherently complex nature of the energy projects in question really prevented the pilot from reaching its true potential. And participants are only now able to begin accessing the funds. So in reality, it'll only be fully implemented for a small portion of its 3-year life. And the projects we implement will not be quite as exciting as the ones we had originally envisioned. So this will lead picture.
So the time frame kept you from being able to do, I think you called the transformative project, and kept you doing some smaller ones.
Correct.
Okay. Senator Brock has a question.
And that is, hi, good to see you again. Question is, in the event that the 18-month extension that's being discussed here, what will that mean to your ability to perform projects of a transformational nature?
I can take a stab at that, and Mark, if you want to correct me if I misspeak. I think, where we are on the pilot timeline now, we have sort of had to make decisions about what projects we are going to pursue based on the current structure. An 18-month extension where we can continue to accrue funds will allow us to potentially pivot to the backup project that we had and continue to explore the CHP. I think the agreement that was reached, that was described here, is important in a number of ways. One, it has that 18-month extension, so we could continue to pursue those transformational projects. Two, it does work on a new ESA program, at the same time, so there is no gap. And then I believe there was a question from Senator Hardy about the extension out to 2026, and we think that's important because that would provide a little bit of extra runway for people to continue to spend accrued pilot funds on these really transformational projects that may take a couple more years to build out.
Okay. Any other questions?
And Madam Chair, I would just say that we are supportive of what was described here today, and look forward to working with the parties on the details if you all are interested in moving that forward.
Okay, thank you. Senator McDonald, and we're running into the next agenda item, so.
Quick question.
Yes.
Approximately how much did it cost per kilowatt hour to save the electricity that the company no longer has to use?
Are you talking about the savings from the project that we think we're going to go forward with?
Yeah.
I don't think we have the savings. I think that's still going through the evaluation process. We did submit a number of projects at the beginning of the pilot. They did all screen, they had stuff in the bank, but we can, once we get those numbers, we can get those to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not worried about the extra time to achieve these things. I want to know the measurement device for evaluating them. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that will fall to the public service, their efficiency Vermont is the one that does the evaluating, and we can have them back to talk to us about that. Okay, so we'll do that next time. And then Mr. Poor, and if you want to bring some folks with you, feel free, and we'll have a discussion about evaluating. Okay. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on. Thank you, everyone. Changing of the guard, except the committee. It's up, Senator Bray, I'm sorry.
And just to pass this along to the folks who are going to be thinking about evaluation, I think, one way to say this, it sounds, when we put on our hats trying to think about the common good for every ratepayer out there, I think I have to sort of ask this question. It sounds pointed, I don't mean it to, but I think we have to be able to answer it. And that is, does the expenditure of these electrical energy efficiency dollars in this program provide less of a benefit to ratepayers in general than if you had used a more traditional program, and if so, how do we rebalance that equation? Because the average homeowner, and so I know you're not average homeowners, the average homeowner can't say, how am I doing with my balance of how much I've paid into efficiency run over the years versus what I've got? Obviously, it's a bigger bill you have, so we're interested in sympathetic, but I think we should know what the kind of all ratepayers are getting out of this program versus the people implementing the program. And that's just, I think sort of the level setting in part that I think is behind Senator McDonald's questions.
Ms. Bombardier.
I think I appreciate that question. I think when you ask it, it's important to do a bit of a look back because of the nature of the program before this pilot happened. If you looked at the dollars going to even those of us in the pilots, I'll again just speak for Chroma. Most of our money was going to everyone else and not coming back to us. So I think if you look over a longer period of time, you'll see that this is probably the right shift to make. And when we do projects, we save lots of energy, through one project, which to me helps the greater good. But it is a different animal than lighting and other traditional projects. So that would be my comment. I believe strongly that what we're doing, yes, does it help our businesses? Yes, it does. Does it help the economies of the towns we're in? Absolutely, in the state. But we make big projects happen with lots of energy savings when we do them. And you won't see that from a lot of smaller businesses. So we can have a big impact on the energy reduction, but it costs a lot of money to do it.
Okay. Well, thanks. So I just, I felt like that question was sort of lurking, and I just wanted to get it out so that when we look at evaluations later, we could address it. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to 255. So thank you, everyone that was here for the last one. We will see some of you again, I'm sure. And we're going on to regulating consumer fees for communications equipment. And the first one I have on my agenda is Jim Porter, but I don't know if you all think there might be a better way to list you, but I'm going to start with Jim unless someone says, no, it'd be better if I went first. Okay, Mr. Porter, it is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Jim Porter. I'm the Director for Public Advocacy for the Department of Public Service. And really just a couple of general, more legal comments on this proposed bill. The Department of Public Service certainly has some rulemaking authority, and on occasion we exercise that authority. And so we are fine with the concept of promulgating a rule. One just note that I would make is that the Public Utility Commission has numerous rules regarding various telecommunications and cable operations, if you will. So I was just a little curious as to a bit of a change dynamic. And then one other question I had was, if we promulgate a rule, what would be the enforcement mechanism? And I ask that because typically, we have either laws or we have PUC rules. And when the department, becomes aware of a violation or a problem, our enforcement mechanism, if you will, is first to threaten to go to the PUC and then to ask for an investigation before the PUC. So enforcement was one question that I did have. And then when I look at the rule, one of the components of this would be basically disclosures to the customer of the ability to purchase certain equipment elsewhere. I don't really see a problem with that. I think most of the items on here, that is already a requirement under various federal laws, but I don't think that would be problematic. One question I did have was the bill references communications equipment such as routers, modems, and cable boxes. And as most of you have heard me say before, as a regulator, when we talk about communications, I think of cell service in one area, telephone service, and by that I mean, Consolidated or Waitsfield, and then there's cable service. And as you all know, those things are regulated differently, certainly at the state level. So one question I had, and I'll take cable boxes as an example. So we would be asked to establish a rule to prevent a provider from charging fees that are in excess of a provider's reasonable cost associated with that. One thing, so if you look at the cable box, one thing about cable regulation is franchising authorities for cable service, which in Vermont, it's the PUC, is the state is the franchising authority. They do, under federal law, have the ability to regulate basic service for cable unless that jurisdiction has been deemed to have effective jurisdiction. Vermont is one of those areas that has been deemed at the federal level to have effective jurisdiction, at which point the franchising authority loses the ability to regulate rates for a cable company. So one question, and we may want to hear from the AG or maybe with Ledge Council to discuss, if the setting of a fee for that box could be construed as rate making, I think there might be a potential preemption issue there. But one other, just last thing I'll notice, I now have Consolidated fiber at my house. And when they came to install it, they said, are you going to buy your own router or do you want one of ours? And I said, well, I'll just take one of yours. They said, we have a good router and we do a service protection and we'll come fix it or replace it if you have any issues with it. I was looking at the bill today and I have a line item that says whatever their service protection plan is plus wireless router, and it's $11.99 a month. So if, we looked at the price of that, and let's just, I'm making it up, if we determined what component of that was the actual router, and let's say we said it should be reduced by $2.50. I'm not sure there's anything that would then prevent that company from, in the alternative, raising the price of my service protection plan in a like amount. So, and Clay will talk more about the equipment and what's available and how some of the billing constructs are, but I just wonder if there, could be some problems with that as well. Trying obviously to get to a place where people are paying certainly no more than they should be paying.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Porter? Not seeing any. Clay, you want to talk to us about the equipment?
Sure. Thank you for having us. First, I want to commend the committee for tackling this issue. Certainly is always frustrating when you have to pay your bill and you see how much you're being charged for any utility service. And I don't know anyone out there who would like to pay less or would not like to pay less, excuse me, for their broadband, telephone, and electric services. Did want to just quickly touch on some of the points that Mr. Porter raised, and also talk a little bit about how some companies are factoring equipment into their overall service offering. But before I do that, I did want to just convey kind of where we see this issue in the overall sphere of consumer complaints. We reached out to our Consumer Affairs Division, and as you know, we receive hundreds of complaints every year about broadband service, telephone service, cable service. And looking at the last roughly 4 years, starting in January 2018, we counted 12 cases where someone was complaining about equipment associated with their broadband service, and about 13 cases where, 20 cases where there was an issue with cable related cases. So it doesn't actually seem to be an issue that we're hearing a lot of consumer complaint about. Nevertheless, recognizing that certainly consumers may feel that what they're being charged is inadequate, but carriers incorporate equipment into their service offerings in a couple different ways. When you talk about cable service, there's traditional cable service, the thing that's been around for 30 years. That is usually provisioned with a cable box. That's not always been the case, but when cable went to digital, cable set-top boxes became something that the cable company offered. In most cases, cable companies allow consumers to purchase their own box. And in that situation, the cable company would provide you with a cable card, which is a small device that fits inside a cable box. And so you can go to Best Buy or to another computer type store and buy a cable box for, we looked at a few, $200 to $300 for a cable box. Using Comcast as an example, they provide the first card for free. So the card that allows it to work with Comcast service is generally free. You can buy your own box. Otherwise, there's a rental fee of about $8.50 for that first box. And certainly if you have more TVs, you're gonna have more boxes in your house. Modems and routers that a broadband company might include in their service can be a different story. In a lot of cases, modems are just included with the service. So for instance, when I had DSL a couple years ago, there was no line item charge for the modem. I was given the modem. I believe I was told it was complimentary, but we know that it's built into the service fee. And in a lot of cases with internet companies, you can use your own modem, but that's becoming less and less true with the rollout of fiber. The optical network terminal is something that you'll hear a lot about as fiber gets rolled out, and that's generally something that's not commercially available and often needs to be configured by the company providing the service. So that can even be the point of demarcation where the service that the carrier is offering ends and your responsibility begins. Routers, on the other hand, are widely available on the market. Most, if not all, carriers will allow you to use your own router. But where the industry is really moving is to gateway devices that include multiple different types of functionality. So you're talking about modem, router, streaming services are included. And probably the latest example of that is the Comcast X-Fi gateway that includes all of those services. And to take advantage of some of the additional services that a provider might offer above and beyond simply the connection, the internet connection or the cable service, you might need that box. And that's true of voice over IP service too, with some of those. So I just wanted to convey kind of what the state of the industry is with regard to how these boxes and other equipment that the carrier might rent, how they use those to provision service, and something that I think that we'll have to very carefully consider in a rulemaking setting, as in what devices should be included, excluded, and how, as Jim pointed out, services and equipment might be factored into elements of the pricing structure that we don't have reach into.
Senator Sorokin and then Senator Bray have questions.
Thank you, Clay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have sort of a global question here. When we dealt with the terminals for credit cards, and it seemed like small businesses were unaware that they could purchase these things and were paying exorbitant rental charges. It was sort of a educational, in some ways, an educational bill, but it seemed like it was pretty effective to help our small businesses because there was some sort of competition in the marketplace. I get the impression from your testimony, Clay, that this is like a balloon. We could close down one and the cost will just go up somewhere else. And we're never going to be a match for the Comcasts of the world. They'll figure out a way to make their profits. And if we're dependent upon this service as being an important entertainment service, we're just going to be spending a lot of time on these kinds of issues, and we're not going to win. And I'm just saying that from a gut level, but maybe you could say I'm right or wrong. There are other states that have done some things in this area, but that's my overall question to you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. I don't want to leave you with the feeling that we're not going to win. I don't think that that's necessarily the sentiment you should leave with. But I think it will become complicated as the industry innovates. I think from the cable industry's perspective, and I don't mean to pick on Comcast, but they actually do, as far as when it comes to consumer education, they do actually have good material on their website. They have a Q&A, like an FAQ, I mean, that describes how you can use your own equipment. They list devices that you can buy on the market. So in reviewing this bill and looking at what some of these carriers do, I actually found Comcast to be quite responsive to the consumer need in that regard. And it would be good to see other carriers kind of rise to that level. But I think more than the device, I think the device is going to, as time progresses, we're going to see the device kind of being minimized in the overall package. And it's going to really be more about the services that are offered. Again, to pick on Comcast, you can avoid a lot of the hardware charges by using an app that they offer for free. So a lot of people are buying TVs, Roku-enabled TVs. There's the Apple TV. There's all these other devices that offer different services that the cable company will want to engage with and incorporate an app that can run on those platforms. But from their perspective, I think they're seeing the competition for eyeballs, really. I mean, you have streaming video, on-demand video. You have IPTV, which is giving them a run for their money. I mean, traditional cable is on its way out, and I think we still regulate traditional cable, but I don't think we're going to see that as being a service that exists in a few years. And it's all going to be either on-demand streaming services like Netflix and Hulu, or it's going to be IPTV like YouTube TV, Sling, and even Comcast has a product like that too. So while I think there could be some effective ways to support consumers in this area, we're also going to see companies innovating and the market changing so quickly that it will be an effort to keep pace with the change in technology.
Okay, Senator Bray, quick question, because there's
Sure.
a couple of hard stops at 4 o'clock. So
Okay. The quick question is, can we define a basic setup that everyone will need? Because we're looking at universal broadband. So knowing that the market will innovate, there'll be fancier gadgets that do more things always available. But is there a basic subset that is, that we'd want to regulate? Maybe that's a modem plus router plus Wi-Fi or something like that. So that it's your basic connection. And then beyond that, other technologies. And I know this is a moving target and people combine and discombine. But for instance, when I got fiber in Bristol, they didn't say anything to me about did I want to use my own setup or not. They just showed up, put it in, good to go. It also seemed like there was a built-in, I don't want to say bias, I could say convenience instead, that because I was choosing their equipment, they could do remote diagnostics and resets, so they could provide better service without sending a technician out. So can you say something about, might we look at a basic set that is sort of protectable and then acknowledge that the market will move on with other razzle-dazzle devices and we don't manage those?
Sure. Well, certainly when it comes to broadband service, you're really talking about the modem and the router. And when you're talking about the deployment of service, I think as I hit on with the ONT, which is effectively the modem for fiber service, I talked to one company today who did itemize the ONT, but you can't buy your own, right? You can't bring your own device. And they're charging a fee, but they recognize that, well, they on their price fee, their price schedule on their website, they don't even itemize it out. So why are they itemizing it on their bill? I think what you're going to see for that is the modem will be part of the service. Router is one where you could bring your own for in almost every case, and so that's one. And then the Wi-Fi, if you want to create a mesh Wi-Fi network through your house, that's an area where that's an added service for them. They can do that for you, and they're going to charge you, and they probably charge you, more than maybe if you knew what you were doing and you wanted to do it on your own. But like you point out, that's a supported service. They're going to come out and repair it. They'll fix it, and that's what they're selling too. Is the troubleshooting assistance that they can give you when things aren't working. So it really, I think, to answer your question, militates in favor of looking at what are the services that they're getting, and that's where I think we might get into trouble. Maybe not so much with the CUD because we kind of created the CUDs, but when you're looking at a private provider, that's where the preemption issues start to come in. And that's something that I think, we'd have to study carefully as we create a rule.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to, I'm seeing any questions. Chris Curtis from Attorney General's office.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christopher Curtis. I'm the Chief of the Public Protection Division at the Office of the Attorney General. In that capacity, we enforce the laws of the state of Vermont with respect to consumer protection, which is my purpose for being here today. And I certainly appreciate the committee. Your effort to save consumers money. I've reviewed the bill. It occurs to me, in our consumer protection unit, of course, we enforce laws that protect Vermonters from unfair or deceptive conduct. And the bill before you is less about unfair or deceptive conduct and more about market regulation, and making a determination about what is a reasonable fee. So I defer certainly to the Department of Public Service with respect to its rulemaking authority in that area and its expertise there. I appreciate Senator Sorokin's pointing to what was later Act 4 of the special session, which was an act relating to finance leases for credit card terminals. And perhaps there may be some parallels in terms of consumer education and awareness about rental fees and the scope of fees and what might be contained in the lease agreements. But as I looked back at that bill, and if I am recollecting correctly, I believe that at one point that bill also did contain a provision around, capping the amount. And I think after several iterations of the bill, the legislature elected ultimately to not do that, but instead to move towards dealing with solicitation, material misrepresentations, the elements of the finance lease provisions, and then disclosures to consumers to try to attack the problem. And so, while there's some parallels in terms of rentals of equipment or leased equipment, there are some differences here that are really significant. And I think the department has raised some interesting questions around whether or if there might be issues around preemption, if this might be considered rate making in some way, shape, or form. And then certainly what is the basis for making a determination about what's reasonable or not in the context of additional services and supports that might be offered through these products. So we lack the market expertise in this area to provide you with a lot of guidance there. But I do think that to the extent that what you're talking about is sort of, in part at least, a long history of consumer disclosures, that is something that we always refer to as the first line of consumer protection is what are the disclosures, what do consumers know, what are their options? And so if you're going to move this bill forward, I would really urge you to make sure that the disclosures are robust. I know there's been, Mr. Porter referred to certain disclosures that are already made. So it may be that the department has more information for you on that point in terms of what is the universe of disclosure that's already provided and how meaningful is it. The Vermont legislature over the years has done a lot of good work in terms of trying to make sure that notices are clear and conspicuous and can be easily understood by the average consumer. Sometimes there's a disconnect between what a large corporation might think is effective notice and what a consumer can reasonably interpret. So all of those things are things that your committee might want to explore. And I would say that the efforts you made both in terms of I was trying to think of other examples of legislation in the area of rentals. So the credit card leasing equipment was one. Several years ago, the legislature did a lot of work in terms of rent-to-own leasing companies for things like furniture and housewares. And there was a great deal of time and care that was put into crafting the proper disclosure notices to consumers so they could really understand how much they're paying over time for a given product. So those are all places where I think lawmakers have acted in the past and that go to the consumer protection elements that we're concerned with. In terms of what's an appropriate fee to request, we would defer to the department on that question. You may want to get consumer testimony on that point or certainly get testimony from the entities themselves about whether those fees are reasonable to begin with and how did they arrive at those rental fees. All seem to me would be a good starting place. So thank you for the opportunity to engage in the discussion, and if I can answer any questions, certainly happy to do that.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you. Going on to Zachary.
Madam Chair, I'm
Wait,
sorry, I do
there
have
you
a
are.
question. Chris, could you see advantages to us putting this into consumer fraud sort of section? I mean, is that more straightforward in a way? I would say as somebody who had this bill drafted, we were sort of trying to mirror the credit card terminal, but is that a better fit, or have you done any thinking along those lines?
Well, not necessarily with respect to a rental fee, because again, I mean, companies are allowed to charge reasonable fees or competitive fees, I suppose you might say, for various, goods and services. So I don't see that as an unfair or deceptive act. Our rulemaking authority is really around the Consumer Protection Act. So we have occasionally over the years done rulemaking to protect Vermonters from those kinds of activities. But a straight up fee and what's reasonable or not doesn't strike me as necessarily unfair or deceptive. I do think, again, I mean, one thing that's interesting to note is in the past, I think when you've done made efforts to deal with misrepresentations or disclosures or things like that, you actually put them right into the act. They're actually spelled out in statute.
That's what I guess I'm getting at. Like, is that a better, if we define it as unfair to charge somebody twice the price, is that a more clean solution in a way?
Well, that's a policy determination for you all to make. I certainly think you would want to get, I don't know what the metrics are currently for the rental fees in the industry. So I don't know, for example, I heard the testimony that, it's $8.50 a month for a cable box, at least in one example. I don't know if that is, how that breaks out in terms of like twice the cost of the actual item. On reflection, I know that in the rent to own scenario, I think ultimately there was a cap imposed and it was like 2.5 times the actual cost of the item. So the notion there was, I think, without an interest rate to track, lawmakers were attempting to create some kind of reasonable cap. And that was what was settled on after a great deal of deliberation. So I don't know what the right metric is there. Again, I think
I'm not asking you to, I'm not asking you to come up with the right metric. I'm asking you in terms of the way we've approached these issues historically. Would we be better off, rather than asking Department of Public Service to write rules, would we be better off to figuring out our way of defining it and putting it in to the consumer fraud division as an outline of what we consider to be reasonable? I'm just trying to understand from a practical, you all have expertise in holding up these kinds of laws. And that's what I'm wondering is if it's, in your opinion, a cleaner fit that way, potentially.
I don't think there's any, we would enforce a rule as well as a law. So we don't make a distinction. If the state of Vermont promulgates rules, those are laws of the state of Vermont, and we would enforce them just in the same way that we would enforce a statute. So I don't think that whether it's promulgated rulemaking or whether it's a statutory change, from an enforcement perspective, that doesn't make a difference to us.
Okay. Is one of the problems, though, I think I'm hearing, is that some of this equipment, if I buy the companies and there's they can restart, redo it. I know more than once I've called Comcast and some guy somewhere does something and my TV gets fixed. And so there's a service involved in whatever I'm paying for that box. And I don't know if
that's a good, I mean, I guess the question to industry is what's what do you get with the rental fee? And maybe some of the disclosures have this in them, that by dint of renting or leasing the product, the actual box, associated with that comes a host of services that presumably are covered in part by the fee associated with the rental. So that's a good question for industry. I don't know. So there may be more to it than just the cost of the equipment itself, I suppose is another way to look at it.
Okay. So we'll have to do a deeper dive into that one, I think. Any other questions for Mr. Curtis? Okay, if not, I'm going to go on to Zachary Tamanelli from VPIRG. And there you are.
And I'm just going to share some slides, if that's okay, just because I have some charts and numbers that I think are, maybe make a little bit more sense visually. So thank you so much to the committee for having me in today to talk about this issue. It's an issue that I know we hear from our members, it's very frustrating, the equipment rental fees. So when we saw this bill get introduced, we were really excited about it to take it up. Just by way of introduction, I'm Zach Tamanelli. I'm VPIRG's Communications and Technology Director. And I'm here today really sort of wearing a consumer protection hat. I advocate for our consumer protection issues. I think everybody on the committee is familiar with VPIRG, but just by way of introduction, we are a environmental and consumer protection advocacy organization here working on the ladder today.
Okay. Zach, we are running short on time, so can we just see that we do know who VPIRG is?
Thank you. Okay, concede.
I think we're all well aware.
And I'll cut to the chase. We support S255. This is a simple, straightforward consumer protection bill. And as I mentioned, it's one of the more frustrating elements. We definitely hear about it all the time. And just in terms of why we support this. When we think about these issues, and an issue that's come up a lot, we've been supportive of the efforts that this committee and the legislature has taken to expand broadband, expand internet access, and affordability is kind of a key part of that. And I wanted to just take a minute and think about the fees that are associated with that, and that component of an individual's monthly broadband bill, or in this case, also maybe their cable bill. And just to be clear, I don't think that this bill alone or dealing with this is dealing with the entirety of the affordability issue when it comes to broadband, not by any stretch. That's a multifaceted issue, but fees are a major driver of costs for consumers. So I just wanted to share, this is from Consumer Reports. And in 2018, they did a study to kind of take a look at the average monthly cable bill cost for consumers. And they found that the base package is about $156.71. That's average across the United States. That's what is often advertised as the fee. That's what people think that they're paying when they're signing up, that sort of thing. But then when they get their bill is loaded with all of these kinds of fees, right? And that's not just government and taxes. Those are actually separate here, as you can see, $13.28. But on average, people are experiencing $37.11 in company-imposed fees. These are fees that the provider themselves are electing to provide. And a big chunk of those fees are these equipment rental fees, right? So when we talk about kind of driving down the monthly price, tackling this can potentially be one avenue to deal with that. And the equipment rental fees are particularly high in the United States. So New America, they did a study. It's called the cost of connectivity in 2020. They found that in Europe, the average cost monthly to rent a modem and a router is about $2.13 per month. In Asia, it's about $1.88. And in the US, the average combined cost to rent a modem and a router is $12.56. So we are clearly an outlier here in what we're paying per month for these fees. And the other thing that I just want to note is these equipment rental fees are uniquely unfair, even compared to some of the other hidden fees. And let's just consider for a second, a hypothetical Vermonter who subscribed to a bundle internet cable service through Comcast in 2015. And they received and is renting a combo modem router through Comcast as part of that package, and they've continued that service today. They still have that piece of equipment. Doing the calculation, that individual has paid $1,092 to Comcast for that particular device. That's a device that retails on the market for about $150. So, I struggle to think of any other scenario where we are accepting of a 600% markup on a piece of equipment. This is really uniquely unfair, uniquely frustrating to consumers. And we've talked about a little bit about that consumers do have the option to buy their own equipment. I think the education component of this is really critical. A lot of people aren't aware that they can do this, so the disclaimer that's required in the legislation, that's a really good idea. But even still, there are sometimes potential barriers to people buying that equipment. It may not be available, as you might have heard with the ONTs. They may not be able to afford the upfront cost. I mean, these things can cost $150 to $200. That's maybe not super significant, but given that option or the option of just paying the $10 a month, people may not elect to or be able to, pay the $150 or $200 for their piece of their own equipment. Or they may be reluctant to forego the support and sort of guaranteed compatibility, which we were just talking about, that comes with that. So I guess on that latter point, I think a consumer who decides to forego that and doesn't do that, they could expect to pay a premium or pay a markup for that convenience. But where is the upper boundary of that markup? Like what is reasonable? I would say a 600% markup, and if that consumer continues renting that equipment, that just goes higher and higher, is unreasonable, which this bill is seeking to address. And then the other question becomes, and this has been raised too, what happens if they just shift that cost somewhere else? I think that's likely. There was an estimate in 2014 that Comcast saw about $1 billion annually in revenue from just these equipment rental fees. So they're going to look to make that up, somewhere else. Well, we would still say that there's benefit. I'm going to go back to this chart in the transparency that comes. So people are obviously frustrated by the cost of these fees, but the other source of this is just the sort of hidden nature of it. They think that, they get advertised, we're going to, be paying $156 a month or whatever, and then they're hit with these additional fees. And that makes it hard to comparison shop, that makes it hard to budget. In the same study, they found that cable bills and cable and connectivity bills are often the driving thing that send people over their budget in a month. So even if we're shifting that then to something else, at least there's transparency there. Don't tell me that my service is going to cost $156 and then you're finding ways to load up $10, $20 other fees elsewhere. I want to know what it's going to cost. So, that I would say is kind of the reason why we support this. Just with regard to the specific bill, I think we would support it as it's drafted. It makes sense to do it this way. If you wanted to move it toward a direct sort of consumer fraud, as Senator Peterson suggested, I think that also works really well. I did just want to share, Illinois is considering a similar bill. This is the language here in the Illinois bill, which just really clearly states that essentially providers they must cease charging consumers for these modems basically once they've paid no more than 5% markup on them. So that's actually pretty low. You heard about the rent to own legislation. VPERC supported that back in 2015. There was a formula in there that it's a similar dynamic here where you're potentially paying over a long period of time and paying a lot of money in excess of the value. And that was, I believe, 2 times the cash value was the maximum that the rent-to-own industry could charge for an appliance or a piece of furniture or what have you. So there are some different options that you could look at in terms of if you wanted to get more specific with how you might cap these fees. So that's it. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to testify here. We support this bill. We hope you support this bill as well.
You talked about the price of the modem. So they only can charge you 5% above what they paid for it. But then there's all that service. And they're either going to charge me now to have some guy drive out to my house, portal to portal, to spend 10 minutes pushing a button, or they're going to do it remotely. So if I were them, I'd just put it in as a service fee. I mean, I'd know what it is, but it would probably still be the same.
Well, my response, yeah, to that, and I don't disagree. Again, the transparency, at least you know what you're paying for. So if you're paying
Okay.
for the service fee. And the other thing is, not all of these things are created equal. So the hypothetical Vermonter that I outlined in that is actually myself. I've been renting a piece of equipment from Comcast since 2015. When I did the calculation, I was a little bit stunned by that. So I think I need to go run out and get myself a modem router and swap it out. But so while I'm a little bit ashamed to admit it, it kind of illustrates this. But here's the thing. I have had somebody from Comcast come and take a look and do something to that modem or router a grand total of 0 times in 7 years. So I would much rather, if they did have to come and fix it, pay them $50 to come and fix it, than pay them $1,000 over 7 years for them to do nothing with that router. So I'd at least want to know what I'm paying for.
Okay. May just be generational. Has anyone followed up? I was on the committee when we did the rent to own furniture. And I think I figured out why, because they fix it. You don't have to have the $50 or $100 for the repairman, and they replace it if it dies. And I'm wondering, has anyone done a follow-up since we did that and found out if in any way we cut down on the amount of rent to own that's going on or cut down on their profits? My gut says we probably haven't. But I just think, sometimes we should follow up. Chris, I know you were involved in those discussions.
Yes, in a prior life.
Yes.
Senator, thank you for the question. I am aware of at least one case that was brought for the practices that lawmakers reined in terms of abusive, threatening, harassing phone calls on the part of, at the time, there was testimony from consumers about some of the tactics that rent-to-own entities might use to try to either, collect payment or retrieve the item or good. And I am aware of at least one case, memory serves, that was brought under that law. So it did have some effect, and I know, and there was some enforcement. I don't know as to how effective the cap itself was or is. Recall that there was testimony. I think the reason that lawmakers landed on the 2.5 metric was, there was testimony from some Vermonters who rent to own who said, this is the only way I can access a nice bedroom set, or it's the only way I can access a computer. And I'm willing to pay a little more over time, in some cases a lot more over time, but I'm willing to do that because that's the monthly amount that I can fit within my household budget. So please don't take this away from me. By contrast, there were many advocates that were saying yes, and over the lifespan of those, the costs are really exponentially high. If you used an interest rate percentage model, would be far beyond Vermont's statutory limits on interest rate charges. So that was I think there was in the end a compromise that tried to balance the interests of all parties in terms of making those things accessible, but trying to have some reasonable limitation on what might be charged. And but don't forget, there were a lot of important disclosure requirements that were contained in the bill. There was an actual, basically the contract for those services was spelled out in the bill. And then you had buyout provisions, and you had return and then resume payment provisions, and you had abusive practices that were corralled. So,
but the bottom line is, did it change anyone's behavior? And we're going to have to go on. I think they're still there, all the stores. So I have a feeling not much. But I want to get to Christine before people have to leave.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for continuing to work on these important issues. When I heard about this testimony, I had to scratch my head because I looked through the world through the lens of broadband, and of course, Clay kind of nailed it when he said and I, by the way, I Googled what's happening with cable, and there's so much. I don't use cable. I wouldn't even think of using cable. So I'm going to quickly just run, so I think this may be a problem that's going to go behind us in terms of when we get people connected. And I should also tell you that we're having great conversations with providers, and we're looking at broadband costs, which are looking pretty good from some of these providers. So I'm just going to quickly take you through a typical example of a business case, and it'll be fast, but it'll give you an idea of where this falls out in terms of why I think your problem's going to go away. So I'm going to go ahead and start this quickly. Oh, my share. Somebody has to enable my share.
Oh,
you're all set.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can you see this business example?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is, I didn't send you this ahead of time because I don't want to be locked in stone, but this is somewhat of what you took of an average cost, kind of what we use in the back of our heads in terms of looking at networks. So when you build the infrastructure, we'll be building that infrastructure to the home, and that includes what's called the optical network terminal, which Clay talked about earlier. So we don't separate that charge now, and you'll understand why we don't when we're done. So you're looking at 45K per mile and then 10K per mile per customer connections. And that includes the ONT, that essentially which are the modem of fiber. If we're looking at a typical 500-mile network, total cost $27.5 million. Grant funds, we're hoping for about equivalent of $15 million. So we end up financing about $12.5 million at 20 years at 5%, that's $82,000 a month. So if we go to customer assumptions, 35 underserved and unserved, we're going to hit 50% take rate. That ends up with 1,750 paying customers. You look at now we're going to get to what the bill is. And this is a high level, there's 1,000 items under that bill, but I've summarized them. You got a loan payment of $47 a month, operations maintenance costs of $25 a month. That includes the service of the ONT. Customer care costs, that's your customer care center for $10 a month. So your total average revenue per paying subscriber is going to end up being about $82 a month. And that's actually a little high, but I'm just using it as an example. And that doesn't mean that you don't have a lower cost entry fee, because some people will be paying for gig speed, some people pay for 100 megabits. But the key here is that the CUD model, I really had to stretch to get a high cost for that ONT. It's approximately $4 a month, that'll be built into that. And when the CODs are working with their operating partners, they're looking at the overall margins, that they're making, not specifically on the item. So this item's built in. And by the way, again, going back to that broadband cost being competitive, that's our next area that'll be competition in Vermont. You're going to see a lot of competition for lower cost broadband. So these providers are going to have to trim their margins as much as possible to stay competitive. But we also have community-owned networks working with them to ensure they're not making unnecessary margin. But the overall ONT cost itself is really minimal in terms of the overall cost to the consumer. And I really had to stretch to get $4 a cost for that. It's probably under $3. So, and if you look at that, if you look at what that model that VPERG showed, that $2 or so a month less, that's probably where this will end up, because I assumed a 4-year life to these things, and they're going to last a lot longer. So we aren't at all looking at making any type of profit on that ONT, and the operating partners will be regulated based on their overall margins. So that's I'll take questions at this point. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Well, Madam Chair, I guess I have a question. So I guess I'm hearing you say sort of in the newer model that the CUDs are working under, this is less relevant. Is that what you mean?
I would almost call it irrelevant, because of
But
the
that-
changes that are happening in the industry.
Yeah,
Because the cost is so
so
low. And
so we're 50 years too late, but it's not like the CUDs as much as we're wishing you full speed. You know, there's going to be people that are getting services through Comcast for many, you know, for decades to come here.
Right.
And you're suggesting competition will take care of that, or entirely or partially, right?
yeah, and I agree with you. You know, again, I'm looking at the lens through this broadband world.
Yeah, okay.
You know, so I wasn't even thinking about Comcast, but they will be, you know, they will be around for a while. So the earlier testimony is appropriate. I mean, I wish I could build it all in a year, or we could build it all in a year, but it's not going to happen that fast.
You're muted, Madam Chair.
Christine, are you figuring any service charges? Like, I put that modem in your house and then I can remotely access it and remotely adjust things that people that push buttons they probably shouldn't push, upset.
Yeah, I'm also going to tell you, when you get fiber, your number of problems are going to drop considerably because of what's called a fused network. But yet that customer care includes billing, and all the other services is lumped into customer care.
All right, so you have got a fee in there for that. Okay, other questions, Ms. Hallquist? Thank you, committee. I don't know. We probably should hear from Comcast and the other providers before we regulate them. And think about what might be the best way to do it, or, you know, I have a feeling that Mr. Porter is right. It'll just show up in your bill, but as a service charge, but we'll find that out. It's been a heavy week. Enjoy the weekend. We're back to weights. And timeshares next week. I'm trying to figure out what happened in 2017 to timeshares that seemed to be when a lot of these buyout, sellout, abandonment problems started, and there was now a group that got left. Senator Pearson.
I'm sure, I guess it's starting to become my regularly Friday question. Will we expect any time next week to look at the proposal around how to pay for schools and shifting to income tax? I know we've been waiting on the modeling from
I've been waiting on the modeling, and I asked you if you had some people you'd like to hear from to send that list in, because I don't know where to start, and I haven't gotten it. So if you send something in, we've still got some openings next week.
I'd be glad to. I for me, more valuable than testimony, but I can send you, Faith, some names, is to understand there's not, to me, we have work to do beyond just understanding the modeling. There are some other pieces of it, and given that the modeling is taking some time, I'm hopeful that we can at least identify those questions.
Okay, well, let's just drop me an email and we'll get it. Things we need to start looking at. Okay. All right, Senator Hardy.
Sort of on that, I might suggest, Chris, that we have a sort of school taxation 101 kind of presentation by JFO that explains what how it's done currently.
That'll be a whole day.
I don't know. It might be helpful, maybe not. I don't know. But if we're thinking about changing it, trying to figure out what we do now. I mean, some of us know it. Maybe all of us knows it. I don't know.
No, Senator McDonald knows it. I think that's about it. We used to have a couple guys at the Department of Ed that I would take with me everywhere because they could explain it to the average person. And since we've lost Mark, we'll Mark Peralt. Yes. Well, yeah, we'll lose you too. You never could explain it. But we, we'll do our best. But I don't know that folks over there, A, they weren't there for the history, and B, they've got enough that it won't be probably as
Well, I
complete,
think
but
Catherine,
we'll get something.
yeah, Catherine Benham from JFO should
Yeah.
be able to do it.
You ought to be able to do a
yeah.
walkthrough, or Catherine and somebody else. Okay.
We should make sure though. that
Catherine's
they-
our longest standing.
Wait. I got Senator Brock, who is
I was just-
fading in and out, I think.
Yeah, we should just make sure that when we get the explanation that they include how the coefficient of dispersion is used in the calculation, because that will make it as clear as it possibly can be.
I'll ask.
Randy, is it on your one pager that they provided you?
No.
It's not.
And that's the
Okay.
problem.
I have to go. I have a 4:30 appointment.
That's one of the problems that has always been included with these explanations, even by the experts. And you're thinking of Bill, what's his name at DOE, that every time he'd come in, he'd give you Talbot, right? He'd give you the full explanation, but then he'd hesitate and say, yes, but, and then there'd be a side. And that's one of the problems about education funding. It just isn't clear.
As I said, it's like a camel. It's ugly, but it'll
solves.
get you across the desert. Okay, Senator Bray.
Well, I'm
Then
just
I got to
gonna,
turn you over to Senator McDonald.
I'm just gonna bemoan the fact that it's one thing to get the system down. It's another thing to understand it well enough to know what you can adjust and what the implications of any adjustment are. So as we try to figure out remodeling, that's where I find that it gets a little hard to predict the outcomes. Sort of passively follow it is not nearly as helpful as to figure out what's worth changing and what will that really do to everybody.
And
That's
this
why I find it
is
hard thing to
more than just tweaking. This is going to an entirely new tax system,
Yeah.
which means we're taking money that's available to other services and putting it into this one. And that's my concern.
But it's,
So,
I mean, it's not available in the sense that nobody's paying that tax, Madam Chair.
no, but it's
I hear you
there.
say that
If
over
we-
and over.
If we ever get a governor that'll let this committee do its job, it's there. And it's there in the next recession. We should have put a surcharge on the last one. I voted to do it twice. We've never done it.
I've been waiting for that governor since the late 90s, Madam Chair.
Yep. So anyway, but it is there. And once we use it, it's gone. So, okay, I gotta go.